more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop.
If even former radical feminists start saying that feminism went too far and that modern feminism is the equivalent of hating men, one should be very worried. But unfortunately, especially in the countries in Europe where I'm from, in the last couple of years, I've seen the opposite taking place. I've seen more hate, more mistrust, and the more hostile feelings towards men growing in the broad society. When I was younger, with less confidence, I believed those messages. I actually started to believe the people around me who told me that I was bad for asking women out on dates, or that I was bad for asking women for their phone numbers, or that I was bad for openly talking about sexuality and men's issues. But I can see now that I wasn't bad and I wasn't wrong. The people who started to hate me for this were operating from a deep mistrust, from a deep hate, and from deep hostile feelings towards me and towards men. This video is dedicated for men who feel lost in a modern world, or for women that still believe that feminism is a good idea, or women who woke up and saw how the modern climate treated men in the last years, and they saw that this is not the correct way to go, like Emma Watson. Whatever person you might be, I think this message is going to be very important for all of you. So 4 years ago, when I started going out more and I started approaching women, I had a lot of fears. What could happen if I openly started approaching women? I knew that I was approaching sensitive topics in society in Germany back then, and there was a certain risk that came with that. But I made the decision to face the consequences of my actions. And unfortunately, the results were much worse than my fear could have ever told me. There were always those things, most of the things that you're afraid of are never going to happen. Well, the things I was afraid of, almost all of them happened, and some were even worse than I could ever thought they could be. I participated in social groups for political activity or for charity. And whenever I started openly approaching a woman, asking them out on dates or for their phone number, I was so often met with mistrust. I've met women who I approached and they were talking to me like normal girls, not saying that I have an issue, and then they went behind my back to the organizer of the group and tried to get me kicked out of it. Those kind of situations kept on happening over and over again. And I was always met with hate and with the kind of attitude that what I was doing was incorrect, to the point where I even got problems for approaching women in bars. And that was so funny because when I approach women at charity events or political parties or whatever, they always told me this is not the place for that. But even when I approached women at the classic place for that, which is a bar, I still got hate. When I started talking openly about sexuality and my shame, things got really messy. I started expressing when I had sexual thoughts or feelings towards women because I was ashamed of that. And people started treating me like a sexual predator from that point. And the reason this is such a bad idea is because, especially today, we have a huge mental health crisis, especially for young men, and a huge addiction problems. Addiction numbers have been skyrocketing over the last decades. Now, shame is very closely related to addiction. And the reason why men are getting more and more addicted is because they are ashamed of who they are, especially in terms of sexuality, and society is teaching them exactly that they're correct about those feelings. And I can tell you that from experience because that's how people treated me when I was open about my sexuality. Yeah. We live in a world now where young men who look at women's asses are considered to be dangerous. Yeah, that's predatory. When we have a trans woman who says biology is nothing but a social invention, then that's celebrated. Now, what's obviously going to happen is if you tell men that they're shit all the time, they're going to believe that. Yeah. Maybe you should have a kid and you tell this kid for 10 years how fucked up and how shit this kid is, and you see how its self-worth is gonna develop. And now think the whole society is telling you for years what a dumb piece of shit you are. Don't you think that's gonna affect the self-worth and the mental well-being of those people? It's funny how we live in this tolerant and accepting society unless you're a heterosexual man. When you're a heterosexual man, then you're the exception to all that tolerance, to all that love. Then you're not met with love and tolerance, you're met with hate. And if you don't see this as a realistic scenario, a collectivist hate towards a group, then you do not understand human psychology at all. A couple of decades ago, there was an experiment conducted where they wanted to study how people would respond to authority, which was telling them to be violent, basically. They connected a guy who was part of the experiment to an electroshocker and asked the participants to give an electroshock when the guy was giving a wrong answer. In reality, he wasn't even connected to an electroshocker, but the guy who thought giving the electroshocks thought they were. Now, what they found is that if you put a doctor next to the guys giving electroshots, which is an authority figure, even if it's not a real doctor, it just looks like one, people will give electroshocks to the guy even if the person is begging them to stop. They will keep on giving them electroshocks until they break down. And this is the case for 9 out of 10 people. This social experiment was designed to see if people have changed after the dictatorships that we saw in the 20th century, Nazi Germany, etc. And the result was not at all, and people are still this way. If people are met with a collectivist thinking that's targeted to another person or to another group, even if it means giving them violence, if authority tells them to do so, 9 out of 10 people will follow. And this is exactly what we could see in the last couple of years. You think modern feminism is not connected to that at all? Well, tell me this. Nazis thought that Jews have all their power for suppressing Germans. What do feminists believe today? They believe men have all their power because they're using and suppressing women. And that's the justification to treat them like shit. And that's exactly how they operate. It's the same emotional dynamic. And they have even less excuse to do so than the Nazis, because the Nazi Germany was created in a time of hyperinflation when people had nothing. Today, women have everything in the Western world, and they still act this way. The feminists, not women. I'm not saying women because I don't believe that. This is very dangerous and concerning developments, and I think that people should reflect on what they're doing. Because right now, especially in Europe, they might not see it, but they're making man's life hell. But men also have a responsibility to act. They need to stand up to this. And if they don't, it will become worse. If you're a man and you feel like you've been affected by those topics, I will put a link in the comments and you can schedule a conversation with me there for free. Thanks for watching.